Yeah, and it's funny because it just kind of dawned on me at one point, and I don't know what triggered the realization. And again, Andrew, I think a lot of this you don't have to be a rocket scientist or even particularly astute to see the crumbs that are left at our feet. The question is, can you put these crumbs together in the form of a cookie? And that's what I try to do. Now, I don't know for sure that I'm right, but I'll take you down that road for the privilege of your listeners anyway. My line of thinking. And you're right, it starts with the BIS, who I think it does things in a way that just scream, really? What I mean by that, and to your point, was, in 2017, when the Bundesbank said, give us back our gold, we just give us back our gold already after 3 years of trying. What became interesting was the other banks within a few weeks that decided to do the same thing, repatriating their gold from the New York Fed, that being the Bank of Hungary, Turkey, Poland, Austria, the Czech National Bank, the Dutch National Bank, all of these banks that give us back our gold, which was unusual in 2017 after 6 years of the market heading down. And the following year in 2018, those same banks bought more gold as a group than they did in the previous 60 years combined.
Now, he's going to rattle off these countries and many more here in just a second, but I thought I'd look at just the first 6 that he mentioned. Let's look at Hungary. Hungary has been one of the more aggressive gold buyers among European nations. The Hungarian National Bank tripled its gold reserves in 2018, raising them from 31.5 metric tons to 94.5 metric tons, the highest level since 1986. This move was part of a broader strategy to, 1, ensure financial stability, and 2, reduce reliance on the euro and the US dollar. Although specific 2024 data is less detailed, Hungary's approach reflects a continuing trend among European countries to bolster their gold reserves. They put out a press release on October 16, 2018. Quote, in keeping with the historical role of gold, gold remains one of the safest instruments in the world, and even under normal market conditions. And think about that. In 2017, the markets had been going down. Right? They've been going down from a number of years. And so gold would be a hedge against markets going down. But they're saying even under normal market conditions, provide a stability and confidence building function. Gold is still considered to be one of the world's safest assets, whose characteristics can be attributed to gold's unique properties such as finite supply of physical gold. Again, we're talking about them bringing their physical gold back to their own countries within their own borders, and lack of credit and counterparty risk given that gold is not a claim against specific partner or country. In other words, it's a claim against itself, gold in and of itself. Let's go to Turkey. Turkey was the largest buyer in the first half of 2024, adding 45 metric tons of gold to its reserves. Turkey has also repatriated significant portions of its gold reserves from foreign vaults back to the country. This move is part of Turkey's broader strategy to increase economic sovereignty and reduce reliance on Western financial systems. The Turkish government views gold as a hedge against currency depreciation and economic sanctions. Let's talk both of those. A hedge against currency depreciation. In other words, the Turkish currency. Because gold is actually money. So their currency could be depreciated because of economic situations in the world they can't control, but gold will remain there. And then also economic sanctions. In other words, what Turkey's saying there is that they're concerned that if they do something that angers the United States. I can think of one. Again, not trying to turn this into political, but political does cause markets to change. And right now, if Turkey were to side more heavily with, say, the Palestinians in Gaza, well, the U.S. might use economic sanctions. Well, the more gold that Turkey has within its own borders, the less such sanctions can deal with Turkey. Poland increased its gold reserves by 19 tons in the second quarter of 2024. The Polish central bank has been building its gold reserves as a measure of financial security, with a plan to have gold constitute 20% of its total reserves. Now, if it's good for Poland to have 20% of its total reserves as gold, what does that indicate about us? Again, just a thought. Austria. Citing a need for risk diversification, Austria announced they will be repatriating gold from London during 2015. So see, these countries have been doing this for a number of years. And when that switch gets turned over, because the Bank of International Settlements, as he's going to talk about here, is going to say, well, gold is a tier one asset. And when that happens, these folks have been ready. And it's like as if they've been primed. And that's why he's saying this. It's as if they've all figured this out since about 2015, and they've been moving gold into their own physical lands little by little. After the repatriation process has completed, 50% of Austria's gold will be held in Austria, 20% in Switzerland, and the remaining 30% in London. The Czech Republic. The Czech Republic increased its gold holdings by 6 tons in the second quarter of 2024, reflecting its growing interest in gold as a safe haven asset amid global uncertainty. How about the Dutch? Netherlands. In a recent interview, the Dutch central bank, DNB, shares it has equalized its gold reserves relative to GDP to other countries in the Eurozone and outside of Europe. In other words, it's doing the same thing that all the other countries within the EU are doing. This has been a political decision because of their belief that gold will re-enter the monetary system within a few years. Remember, 1971, let's not forget what Nixon did in 1971. Taking the US off of the gold standard, the whole world had to use the dollar, or the petrodollar as it is called, to settle transactions. But what the Netherlands is saying is that they believe gold will re-enter the monetary system within a few years. In other words, and the Bank of International Settlements has already said that gold is a tier one asset. And when they turn that switch on, all of these central banks are going to be ready as, say, the dollar begins to devalue itself, but gold will remain a constant. And that's why these countries have been moving gold into their own physical possession. The Netherlands has become concerned about the safety of their official gold reserves held abroad. If there's a financial crisis, the gold price will skyrocket. And official gold reserves can be used to underpin a new gold standard, according to DNB. So that's what they're concerned about, is that gold will be re-entered in to the Bank of International Settlements as a tool. And he's going to talk about that here in just a second. But this is why they're hedging their bets and getting physical gold on premise. And again, if it's good for these central banks to do it, what about us as just individuals? If the dollar begins to lose its value, what we'll see is that gold will probably retain its value just as it has for years and years and years. And that's why all these central banks are banking on that future event by buying gold and repatriating that physical gold into their own possession. Not just shares of it held in the New York Bank or in London or in France, but physical gold in their vaults.
All right, now something's unusual, and I'm talking about it nonstop. In 2019, I started doing YouTubes, and those banks that bought more gold as a group than they did in the 60 years previously combined while repatriating all their gold from the New York Fed and the Bank of England, they doubled that amount in 2019. And then just somehow miraculously by coincidence, the BIS said, that's right, gold is the only other tier one asset. And that's really when I started to follow you very closely, because you might have been the only other one around that was talking about this. And it started to make sense to me, like, yeah, well, the BIS obviously, as the most powerful bank on the planet, told these central banks, listen, here's the plan. It's going to be reclassified tier one. You might want to bring it home. You might want to start buying it. Just became obvious to me. So we'll fast forward to where we are now. And I want you to keep in mind the BIS again and the way that they operate. So over the last couple of years, it's been well documented that the central banks have bought more gold than at any time in central bank history. And what's been unusual about the gold acquisition over the last several years, to me, is the repatriation. And just a simple Google search will show you that Germany, Austria, Slovakia, Argentina, the Netherlands, Saudi Arabia, just a few weeks ago, Hungary, Belgium, Egypt, just a few weeks ago, Senegal, just a few weeks ago, Romania, Nigeria, just a few weeks ago, Poland, Ghana, just a few weeks ago, India. That's an interesting one. Bought 1.5 times the amount of gold they bought all of last year within the first 4 months of this year. Last year being a record year for central bank buying, and they bought 1.5 times the amount they did all of last year in the first 4 months of this year and had it shipped home, along with 100 metric tons of gold that were held at the Bank of England since 1991. Turkey, France, Serbia, Venezuela, Algeria, Cameroon, South Africa, just a few weeks ago, Czechoslovakia, and many others. That's just a simple Google search. But all of those central banks brought all of their gold home. Now, the conventional wisdom would be, look, the United States just stole $5 billion in assets from the Russian government. And I don't like the word sanction, because it's not sanction. It's default, and it's stealing. And when Janet Yellen can say to CNN, hey, listen, we're okay with Xi and Putin being friends and allies. And my initial thought is, well, geez, thank you so much, Madam Secretary. That's rather benevolent of you. But she says if Putin or Xi gives one penny to the Putin war machine, we will sanction their banks, their companies, and Beijing itself. Never mind the fact that we've given $260 billion to the Ukraine with no congressional oversight, Stinger missiles and F-16 jets and the intelligence on where to drop it, because we're the world reserve currency. Doesn't matter what we do. It only matters what you do. And this is the rallying cry, of course, that I focused on for a very long time. And that would be the conventional wisdom. They're all bringing their gold home from the Bank of England and the New York Fed because what once was Western rule of law and safe jurisdictions doesn't really fit the bill anymore when the European Union just confiscated, stole the interest on $280 billion worth of Russian assets to provide a loan to the Ukraine. This is a line you don't come back from, in my opinion. And the rest of the world is like, things need to change. Well, that's a conventional wisdom, but I don't think it's right. It's only part of the reason why they're bringing their gold back. So let's focus on the BIS again and Project Enbridge and the unit token. And think of the way the BIS operates, or at least did that back in 2017. I believe they told the banks in 2016 or 17, you got the Basel III, gold's going to be reclassified tier 1. Start buying it, maybe bring it home. So they gave them 2.5 to 3 years head start. So let's look at the way they're doing things now. So you have a meeting a few weeks ago in Novograd, Russia, that coincided with the G7 meeting. And, we were told at the beginning of the year there'd be 200 BRICS meetings leading up to the big one in October. And three things that I think came out of the G7, out of the BRICS meeting in Novograd that are very substantial. Number one, the Royal Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia was invited to the G7 meeting, and he said, I'm busy. But at the same time, he sent his financial ministers to the meeting in Novograd. Turned down the G7 meeting in Italy, which was a big deal as far as I'm concerned. It's a snub. It's one of these little crumbs that you can see, right? So sends his finance ministers to the Novograd meeting where two very important things came out. Now, I know that you have, and I have been talking about the fact that the BRICS would issue some form of a currency that would be backed by commodities and by currencies, largely because of Sergei Glaziev. And Sergei has told us this for 3 years. I've done 3,000 videos talking about Sergei and his plan to issue some form of a settlement currency backed by a basket of commodities, as he said, and a basket of BRICS plus currencies. And reclassifying gold tier 1 just made so much sense that this would be the predominant asset within the basket of commodities. So there was a meeting on the sidelines, 2 meetings on the sidelines at the BRICS meeting in Novograd. But the first thing that I want to mention is that they came out and said 59 countries have formally expressed interest in joining. Now, we don't know which 59 countries they are, but you put them together with what we already have, add in the Belt Road Initiative, the Eurasian Economic Union, which, by the way, Sergei Glaziev is the finance minister for the Eurasian Economic Union. And I've been saying for a long time, I'm sure you have too, that the Eurasian Economic Union and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization would join together with BRICS. You got the president of Belarus calling for a summit to do just that. They will join. But you put those two groups in with the BRICS, in with the Belt Road, and the 59 countries that are applying, you're talking the majority of human population. Not just that, 2 of the 3 largest nuclear arsenals in the world, the majority of global GDP, the majority of commodity production and refining. This is no small deal. So anyways, Dilma Rousseff, the former president of Brazil, now the head of the BRICS New Development Bank, not a small position, came out and said, I had 2 meetings on the sidelines with Sergei Glaziev and Putin. And in principle, we have agreed to a new settlement currency. And I think it's important to highlight the word settlement. This is not a BRICS currency. It is a common settlement currency that they are proposing. And she said, in principle, we have agreed to it. It will be called the unit. And it will be 40% gold in kilobar form, deliverable on request, and 60% a basket of BRICS plus currencies. And, they took out the commodity part and just use gold, the only other tier 1 asset, which the central banks have been buying hand over fist. Just makes sense, right? So in reading the white paper on the unit, I noticed some very interesting things. But before I touch on that, if you look at Project Enbridge is a cross-border payment service and or vehicle that sidesteps the SWIFT and allows for these countries to trade their central bank digital currencies with one another outside the Western intermediary banks, no SWIFT, no sanctioning, if you will. And it was a joint effort between China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and the United Arab Emirates. We've talked about that for over a year. And, I've been saying for a while, I'm sure as you have, that gold and oil seem to have been remonetized across the globe, that they are worth more than the currencies that are used to buy them, certainly worth more than the dollars that are used to buy them. And It's interesting that the first two trades they did on Enbridge last year was China trading with United Arab Emirates digital yuan for gold and for oil. You look at oil as being remonetized. China was awarded a $2 billion contract to remodernize the largest airport in Iran, paid for with oil. It used to be paid in dollars. Now it's paid in oil. And certainly when we look at gold and its role or replacing the treasury bond, it's doubled the performance of the 10-year treasury in the past 25 years and has no counterparty liability. It can't be sanctioned or stolen. And so you see a lot of countries that are using gold to replace the long bond and using oil as a form of money. Okay, all of that being said, let's go back to Project Enbridge. Who's behind Project Enbridge besides those four countries? Oh, lo and behold, it's the BIS. And Saudi Arabia just became a full participant in Project Enbridge. Let me say that one more time. Saudi Arabia, the largest producer of oil in the world, just became a full participant in Project Enbridge, which is not compatible with US dollars that the BIS is behind. Now, think of the way the BIS did things in 2017, 18, and 19. And I know they said to these banks, we're going to reclassify it tier one, get your gold. So if you look at all of these banks that I just mentioned, nearly 40 banks that have brought all of their gold home, and if you look at the massive amount of gold purchasing over the last couple of years by the central banks, BIS is at it again, I would have to think. Because if you read the white paper on the unit token that will trade on Project Enbridge, it says something very interesting, and that is that the baskets that will be used to mint these tokens that each country will mint will be 60% BRICS plus currencies. And by the way, I did an interview with Vince Lancy not too long ago, and he thinks, and I think it's genius, that China, Russia, maybe India, they will do all they can to back their central bank digital currency with some form of gold backing so that it comprises the majority of the currencies within the basket. But anyways, it says that the baskets, 60% currency of BRICS plus countries, 40% gold in kilo bars deliverable on demand, will be minted, pulled out of circulation, put into an escrow account. Here's the key: within the borders of the countries that possess said gold. They do not need to send their gold to a central authority like Beijing, like Moscow. No, every country will have their own baskets of these unit tokens that are put in escrow and audited independently, continuously, with very strict penalties for abandoning in any respect the protocol of the unit ecosystem. And so you have independent auditing, but the key is within their own borders. So with all of these countries buying gold and bringing it home, it just reeks of the BIS again, who is behind Project Enbridge. And what it also says is that these countries will use their own central bank digital currencies. It's not a common currency. So if you look at all of the countries that make up 99% of GDP, every one of them has a CBDC in production or already working, operational. And so every one of these countries will be able to maintain their own monetary autonomy. They won't have to first convert to a dollar with the Western banks, KYC and AML, anti-money laundering, know your client, very lengthy time lag, costly. Instead, they'll all have their own CBDCs and trade over Project Enbridge with one another. And if it gets to the point where a country says, listen, I have enough digital yuan, or I have enough digital rupee or ruble, whatever, I want to, and you want to buy energy or a commodity, let's use the unit token. The unit token will be 40% gold in kilo bars, 60% BRICS plus currencies. The gold is deliverable if indeed you want. That's all over Enbridge. And if they said they're going to come out, in principle, they've agreed to this. They're going to have a meeting in September in China to ratify it. If they roll it out in October, if they truly do, what does that say for the future of the dollar, which we don't need it anymore? Obviously, we can use our own CBDCs and trade with one another, free from the Western meddling and sanctioning and theft. And if we need to settle in something bigger, well, we can do the unit. And so that takes away all impetus to own U.S. treasuries. Instead, you stockpile gold because it has doubled the performance of the 10-year treasury. It's the only other tier one asset, and they can't freaking steal it from you. So as far as I'm concerned, Andrew, if this happens, you can argue, I can argue that they've lit a fuse already on the dollar. We've lost the hegemony. That happened arguably a few weeks ago when Saudi Arabia said, yeah, we'll still take dollars, but we're going to take other currencies too. They didn't sign the exclusivity deal or re-sign it. Okay, so the hegemony is gone. The supremacy isn't. But what happens if all of a sudden the majority of human population now has no impetus to stockpile dollars, as they have for 50 years, creating a synthetic demand for the dollar, and have no impetus to stockpile treasuries, which was the other half of the petrodollar deal, where we reinvest all excess proceeds in treasuries, which have performed nowhere near as good as gold. And we have proven that if, you're on the wrong side of our ideological thinking, we're going to take your assets. And that, I think, is the whole reason you're seeing all of these countries not only accumulate tons of gold, bring it home. So it's twofold. It's the meddling and the suppression and the confiscation of assets, and it's the unit token. And if it is indeed ratified, to which the head of the Brixton Development Bank said, yeah, in principle, we've agreed to it, it's a big deal, maybe the biggest deal ever, right up next to gold being tier 1 revised. I am a patriot. I am the embodiment of the American dream, and I just don't think that dream, I think that dream could quickly turn into a nightmare, and I don't think that dream is as available as it was for me, a kid who started at 19 years old, this company in 1989, before the internet, on a wing and a prayer. And so it's very saddening to me. And I think when you look at it that way, along with the way that we've really screwed the pooch, if you will, by weaponizing the dollar, stealing assets, coercive all around the globe, massive money creation, fiscal irresponsibility, brain dead monetary policy, all of these things, and then throw in the complete degradation of this wonderful country, it's starting to move faster. But I will say it's never been more important to own precious metals ever, not to become wealthy, but just to get the hell out of the way of what's coming. If you are reactionary, like you talked about the gaslighting and people being reactionary, you're dead. Most insurance expires worthless unless there's a calamity or you die and your family gets it. With gold, if you don't need it, you give it to your family, or you use it for an opportunity when the dust settles. Maybe there will be, who knows? But you're not getting this from the Western media in any way at all. So, like I said, it's just nice to be here and be able to, get this off my chest. It's kind of cathartic. I feel much better now, so thank you.